February was a very, very good month for reading. Welcome back to my channel, guys. My name's Sean. If you're new here, my channel is everything book related. We're now in March, so I need to do a wrap up of all the books that I read in February. I read 13 books for the month of February, so let's go through them. First things first, I've got my cold pressed juice. Oh, how cute. I don't know why, but things just taste better when they're drunk out of like a glass straw. I don't make the rules. Oh my god, that's so good. Anyway, back to the good stuff. I started off the month with Throne of Vengeance. This is book 2 in the Thrones duet by Rena Kent. I read book 1 as the last book for January, so I started off the month with book 2. This is Ray and Kyle's books. They're Nikolai's parents from God of Fury. This was a mafia romance duet. If you know me, you know that mafia romance has me in a chokehold like no other. It is my favourite. It is my favourite genre. I'm quite feral for mafia romance, but it has to be good. And Rena Kent just never misses. Ray is basically trying to solidify her place within the organisation, and Kyle is sort of undercover, but they had a little thing years ago. Neither of them acted on it, and then he disappeared for years. She kind of fell in love with him, and then all of a sudden he's back, and she's not wanting to let her guard down, but they have to enter into this arranged marriage to appease her family so that she can kind of maintain some sort of position of power within the organisation. It is so good. I gave this book 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Metal Slinger by Rachel Schneider. I read this as a tandem read with one of my friends. I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed the experience of reading it with her. We were like texting each other about what was going on and stuff, so that was really fun. This is a fantasy romance. Basically, the main girl and her people, they take a ship over to like foreign lands. They're allowed to visit this market once a year to get like supplies and things that they need to sustain themselves back home. When they get there, she's walking through the market and she gets accused of stealing, and these guards try to like capture her. So she fights her way out, and she ends up, she didn't steal, but she ends up then stealing one of their knives. So all of their people kind of flee, they get back on the ship and they sail back home. They think that's it, and then the next thing, this other ship arrives at their lands, and it's one of the guys who tried to like arrest her, and he's come back for his knife. So they're like, oh my god. This guy gets locked up in their dungeons, and she feels kind of like drawn to him, like there was like some sort of connection there, and she couldn't really explain it. So she goes to visit him in the dungeon. She like sneaks in. He says some things to her that have her questioning what's going on. It's like a seaside village, and it starts to flood, and the dungeons will flood, meaning that he will die. So she saves him. They end up fleeing because she's basically aiding and abetting a criminal, and they end up fleeing, crossing the sea and going back to these lands. And it turns out that this guy wasn't actually there to get the knife, he was there for her, and that they're a lot more intertwined than she realised. There's a lot going on, and there was a twist at the end that actually blew my mind, like my head fell off. It's a very, very, very good book. Not my favourite fantasy that I've read, but still very enjoyable. I gave it 3.75 stars. I would definitely recommend reading it. Then I went back to Rena Kent's universe. I am trying to power through her universe this year. I started off reading the Legacy of God series. I didn't realise there was a whole reading order and about 5 million books to read. So I read that, and then I started from the beginning. So then I read Red Thorns. This is book 1 in the Thorns duet. This is Sebastian and Naomi's book. I didn't enjoy this as much as her other work, but I did enjoy it. I gave this book 3 stars. It's kind of a bully romance. Sebastian's not very nice to Naomi. He kind of forces himself into her life, even though she doesn't want him in her life. They kind of have like, they both enjoy like primal play. So they have that in common, and feelings develop, but there's external forces that are trying to keep them apart. It was a good story. Then I moved on to Blackthorns, which is book 2. I gave this 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it a bit more than book 1, but it kind of wrapped up their story very nicely. There was a time jump that had me shook. I was actually shook to the core. There was a plot twist that I guessed in book 1, and then I thought, oh no, I'm wrong, and then it turned out in book 2 I was actually right. So love that for me. Not my favourite couple and not my favourite book, but still very enjoyable read. They're not too long, so you can power through them quite quickly, which I really like about her books. Then I read My Dark Desire by L.J. Shen and Parker S. Huntington. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. This is book 2 in the Dark Prince Road series. This one is a kind of Cinderella retelling, so it's an enemies to lovers. Zach's son is like a billionaire CEO of his company, and Farrow owns like a cleaning company with her family, but her dad has passed away and she lives with her stepmom and two stepsisters who hate her and treat her like a slave. So she's like Cinderella. She tries to steal something from Zach, from his house, and he catches her and he basically says, you have to now come and work for me and clean my house. He's undeniably drawn to her and they have this banter. They both hate each other but also can't stay away. So it's like opposites attract. Zach has some trauma in his life. It's a very, very sad story. They both have things going on in both their lives, and yeah, that just, I really like the character development and the backstory and the plot. This series is very, very good. If you haven't read it, the series starts off with My Dark Romeo, which I also really enjoyed. Then I read Scythe and Sparrow by Brynne Weaver. This is book 3 in the Ruinous Love trilogy. I can't lie, I was a little bit disappointed by this book. I was expecting it to be on par with Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark. I thought it would be on the same level of comedy, and it wasn't. It didn't quite hit for me. I gave this 3 stars. It was a good story, but it just, the impact that the others had, this one just didn't reach that level. Fionn didn't really do it for me, I can't lie. Rowan and Lachlan both had that thing about them. Fionn just, he didn't have it. And I didn't think it was anywhere near as funny as the other two. There was maybe like 2 or 3 instances where I fully laughed at this, but not really that much. It was more like a giggle rather than actually laughing my arse off. I really liked Rose. I thought she was a proper character, and there was some elements that I found really funny, and it was very well thought out. The plot was there, but it just wasn't on the level as the other two, so I was a little bit disappointed because I expected more. Basically, Rose is in the circus and she gets injured trying to kill a man, and she winds up at Fionn's clinic and he helps her, and he's like, basically, come and live in my house because she's living in this trailer and it's not safe and stuff. There's something about her that he's drawn to, so he's like, come and stay in my house. It's a very slow burn. They both like each other, but neither one of them are willing to act on it because Fionn's been hurt in the past. Eventually they do act on it, and Fionn does something to get her out of a mess that she's created, and then he has to go away for a little bit, and then they find their way back to each other in the end. So it was a good story, just not my favourite. Then I read Salt in the Wound by Sierra Simone. This is the novella to the Lioness trilogy, so it's only short. I gave this 2.75 stars. This follows Isolde, and she's promised to Mark, who's a lot older than her, and it's basically because her dad wants to get into a business deal with him. She'd always hoped to become a nun because she's extremely religious, and her uncle holds a position of power within the church. He works with like the Pope in Rome and stuff, and she'd always hoped to become a nun and serve the church for her life, and her dad's like, absolutely not, you're gonna marry this man for me. But the man in question owns a kink club, so she's very innocent and is forced into this lifestyle with him. So it's basically how she meets Mark and how their relationship comes about. Mark is very cold. He acts like he doesn't like her, but then at the same time says that he does want her and he chose her and things. So it's setting up the story. It's a little confusing, but I think the reason I knocked it down a few stars was because it's very religion heavy, but that's because it is from Isolde's point of view, and obviously she has that religion heavy mindset, so it had to be that way. But I feel like I needed to read this for completeness of the series. Even though I didn't enjoy it that much, it was necessary to set me up for the series. So then I read Salt Kiss, which is book 1, and holy shit, I was obsessed. I gave this 4.5 stars. This book is incredible. This book follows Tristan. Tristan is Mark's bodyguard. Isolde isn't in the picture in the start, and Tristan comes to work for Mark at the club, and he sees a lot of things going on. He's come out of the army, and so he's got kind of PTSD. He's traumatized, obviously. He gets involved with Mark and he falls in love with him. They enter into this relationship, but he's aware of what it is. There's no strings attached, but Mark hasn't mentioned that he's engaged to Isolde. He hasn't said a thing about it. And then one day Mark gets hurt. This is the time that Isolde is supposed to then come and marry him. So he sends Tristan to go and retrieve her. And they have to sail from England, I think it is, back to the US, and it's going to take 3 weeks. So Tristan and Isolde get to talking on the boat, and he realises he's in love with Mark, but Isolde is also in love with Mark, but Mark treats them both not the best. They kind of get the scraps of his love. He's very closed off. He's not that type of guy to admit his feelings. So they both bond over their longing for him, and they get into a relationship because Mark and Isolde have both said they'll be faithful to each other once they're married, but before then they can do whatever they like. So Tristan and Isolde get it on. It's just everyone's having a great time, especially me. Then I dived straight into Honeycut, which is book 2. I gave this 4.25 stars. Again, this book was incredible. There is obviously a lot of spice and a lot of kink that goes on in these stories, but it's not just that. It's full of like espionage and mystery, and there's other things at play here. It's not just the love story, although the love story is very prominent, and they're all trying to navigate each other. They all want to be with the other. They're all having relationships with each other. It's just so good, and I'm not gonna lie, these books did have me like sweating. They are Spicy. So good though. Then I was lucky enough to get an ARC of Wildside. I received an e-ARC of this book. I absolutely devoured it. I gave it 5 stars. This book is unbelievable. It came out on the 4th of March, and that day I had a parcel through my letterbox and I've been sent a physical copy. A limited edition. It's got green pages and it's been signed by Elsie. I was like screaming when this came. This is like the perfect trophy for my shelf. Like, how beautiful is that? I'm sorry, it's stunning. So let me tell you about this book. I didn't think anyone could ever overtake Daddy Cade, and then West Belmont came along and I thought, well, this is it, because this guy is like perfect. Let me introduce you to Rhys Dupree. Holy shit, this man is unreal. Rhys and Tabby, they were kind of like rivals to lovers, and they have to enter into a marriage of convenience basically because Tabby's sister passes away and she has a son. She was renting a house from Rhys, so he lived next door. In Erica's will, she basically leaves her son Milo to Rhys and not Tabby. But Tabby's like, well, obviously I'm gonna look after my nephew, like, I love him. So Rhys comes to town and is basically like, I'm taking him. And then the grief counsellor says it's best not to uproot him at the moment, so Rhys keeps travelling back and forth to visit, and then they're both trying to make a plan as to what's best for Milo. They both don't like each other, they both don't trust each other. Tabby is very bitchy, she's not really grieved for Erica's death. Rhys doesn't live in the country, so he keeps getting stopped at the border, so they decide to get married so that he can come and go until they sort things out. And the relationship starts to feel less fake as time goes on, and I just can't even explain how good it is. They both have their own backstories. Rhys has a very sad upbringing and it's just beautiful. I don't want to spoil it because I know it's just come out and I know people wouldn't have had time to read it yet, so I'm trying not to say too much, but just trust me when I say that this book is the best in the series and this is her best work. Like, she has actually outdone herself. Go and read this book. Then I read Truly Madly Deeply by LJ Shen. I gave this 3 stars. This is a brother's best friend romance. It's a forbidden romance. So her and her best friend's brother get together when they're like 18, and her best friend finds out and she absolutely freaks out. So she's like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry, I'll never go near him again. The best friend decides to never speak to her again. 5 years pass, she goes off to uni and she doesn't speak to the brother or the best friend anymore. Her dad passes away, so she has to come home, and then she sees them again for the first time. And her mum isn't in a good place, so she has to stay home for a bit, and it turns out the best friend's brother had moved to France to become a chef, and he's a famous chef now, and he's opened this restaurant in town. It's due to close and he's going to be moving to England come January, and she's in town and said to her mum, I'll go back to New York in January. So they're kind of stuck in this small town together, and some of his staff quit short notice. She needs a job while she's in town, so she ends up working in his restaurant, so they can't escape each other. I really love that element of it. The one thing that annoyed me about this book, and the reason why I knocked it down a few stars, was because Cal, the FMC, she has this quirk where she always says the wrong thing and she puts her foot in her mouth all the time. She's really like socially awkward and just, it's like she can't function in society properly, and I struggled to get past that. I really struggled. There's quirky and then there's quirky, and I thought, oh, this is a lot. Like, it was a bit much at times. And then the MMC, Ro, he was very serious and moody and acted like he hated her, but then he found out she was hurt. He like pushed his best friend into a countertop out the way so that he could get to her. And I'm like, the math ain't mathin'. You claim you hate her and you don't want anything to do with her, but you hear she's got a little cut on her head and you literally barging your best friend out the way. It's quite comical, really. It was a good story. I'm definitely going to read book 2 when it comes out this year. Then I read The Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole. I gave this 4.25 stars. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit obsessed with this series. It took me a good 6 or 7 chapters to get into it, and I did contemplate DNFing, but that's really not in my nature, and I thought, everybody says this series is incredible, so there's got to be something to it. Let me just keep going. And I'm so glad that I did, because honestly I was obsessed, like actually obsessed. Sam Keel and Diana, oh, I love them. Basically, I'm not going to try and explain the fantasy world because it's very, very complex, and I'm not going to lie, some of the names are very hard to pronounce. Not the characters' names, but the names of the creatures. Like Diana is an Igmaruthan. What does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? But basically, Sam Keel is a god. Diana is like his sworn enemy. She gets captured infiltrating their, like, let's say headquarters. And in order to save her sister, she has to work with Sam Keel and his team to try and find the Book of Azrael, because there's something in it that can kill a god. Sam Keel wants it to stop his own demise, and Diana wants it because they've made an agreement that if she helps him, he will protect her sister. Very, very good. She is the morally grey one. He's the green flag, which was so refreshing to read. I loved it. Then I finished the month off with The Throne of Broken Gods. I gave this 3.5 stars. I think the reason why I knocked it down a few stars was because Diana made me apoplectic with rage. I was seething, that she made me so angry. It was like visceral. I wanted to reach into the page and literally wring her neck. She was so mean in this book. There's something that happens at the end of book 1, which is devastating. So Diana goes on a warpath. She has every right to do so, but the way she treats Samkiel is awful. I couldn't believe how horrible she was. She redeemed herself at the end, but oh my God, I literally wanted to slap her silly. And there was certain times throughout the book and I thought, oh, is she gonna go back to him? And she didn't, and it was really frustrating. I suppose that is the sign of a good book, when it can evoke these emotions out of you. I just didn't like that. I just wanted them to be together. I'm a lover girl, so I just wanted them to be together. And then the end of this book, I was honestly fighting for my life. I was so stressed. Oh my God, yeah, this this book had me quite unwell, I can't lie. If you haven't read this series though, I would definitely recommend reading it. So they're the 13 books that I read this month. That brought my total for 2025 to 21 books. I have read more than that now because we are a week into March. But my goal for the year is 105, so I'm definitely on track. I just feel like this is such a good month for books. It really has been. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what you thought, and if you've got any book recommendations, then please drop me a comment. If you like this video, then make sure to subscribe because I do post new content every week. And as always, if you made it this far, thank you.